What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to ICNV Drives Edition. A short while back, I did a video about a Z06 engine malfunctioning or messing up, and I really didn't do a follow-up on it. I've commented on it like in the comments to let people know that GM did decide to take care of that. So if you didn't get that update, that is actually what's happened. GM did move forward with taking care of the issue for the owner. But what I'm starting to see now, because I'm involved in a lot of Corvette groups, as you all know, if this is your first time stopping by, thank you for stopping by. What is actually taking place is I'm seeing a lot of people questioning the reliability of the C8 Z06. So I decided to have a conversation about it. So let's talk about this.
I'm on it, I just wanna be iconic. Sipping on a gin and tonic, got me going off when I'm on this topic, yeah. If I ever play, I want it, you know that I'm always honest. Stay away from those who are toxic, keep them out your face, no way, you don't want it, yeah.
Okay, so as we get into this topic, a lot of people are now questioning the reliability of the C8 Z06. There is literally what I would like to call a C8 Z06 hater group, or the people that sit there and say the C8 Z06 is not going to live up to the hype, or GM got way in over their head with trying to make this car. So with that being a focal point of a lot of criticism for this car, what's starting to happen is as more cars malfunction, people are starting to actually criticize GM or this car and say it's not a good purchase, or as you can say, it's not worth the money. And the first thing about that is, if you think about this from a bigger standpoint, considering this car is one of few cars selling over MSRP for $120,000 more than what the MSRP states, anything that goes wrong with it is going to be highlighted, criticized, and brought to the forefront to say it's not worth the money. But I want to have a real conversation with you guys. So yes, there have been several cars that have actually had malfunctions. Most people call that first year buyer's remorse, or things you should expect when buying a first year car, but I don't think that's really the case. Usually the first year you see some situations come up, whereas other things malfunction that you don't pay that much attention to. And what do I mean by that? Well, from the information put out by GM, they've been researching this car since they released the C7. So if you think about that, and I'm telling you, think about that. Since they released the C7, the C7 was released in 2014. The C8 Z06 has come out in 2023. That's 9 years of research focused on a car. So with 9 years of research, you should not see engine problems. Now, from my understanding, the first actual prototype or build of the mid-engine car, the flat plane crank, was built, I want to say 2016, 2017. So even still, we're talking about 6 years of research and of an actual motor. And I'm sure they made changes along the way, but we're not going to get caught up in all that. But my point in pointing all this out to you is that the engine should be the last thing that you expect to go out. The transmission, considering this in the base C8 and it was carried over, should be the last thing you expect to go out. So what I feel a lot of times is happening is, as we saw with the 2020 base C8, GM released a video on how to break in the car. And although they released this video, there were still many people that purchased this car that knew nothing about the vehicle, knew nothing about the break-in procedures, and And their dealerships did a disservice by not educating them on it. But then again, most dealers didn't know information on the car because they was just selling the car and not actually relaying the information. So what I feel like what happens now is we see so many issues with these C8 Z06s because, believe it or not, most people that are driving these cars and complaining about these cars aren't people that purchased the cars from the dealership. Now, yes, we know Stradman had a slight issue, but if you listen to his rebuttal, he tells you he broke the car in the way it was supposed to be broken in, which some of us can question that, or however we feel about it, it's whatever. But the truth of the matter is, for most people that got this car and drove this car, never had a true idea of how to break in this car. I'll say that to you again. Most people that got this car don't have an idea of how to break in this car. And they're looking at it as every other new car purchase they ever made. So what do I mean by that? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, especially if you like this content so far. Hit that like button, subscribe, join the ICNV Driver Edition community. We talk about interesting conversations, as you can see, lots of informative videos, and we have fun on this channel as well. So if you're looking for a way to pass the time with something interesting and yet sometimes quite humorous, go ahead and subscribe, hit that bell, and get the notification for the next video that's coming up. And like I mentioned, there's more content like this coming your way. Most people that ever bought a new car in their life has bought pretty much a family sedan or an SUV, something along those grounds. So like even when I was explaining to my friends when I first got my base C8 that there are just certain things I cannot do until I hit a certain mileage, it was a hard grasp or understanding for them because they've never owned a performance car. Some people who've actually gotten this C8 Z06, if you pay attention to their comments and things of that nature, is they didn't even go after the base C8. They went after the C8 Z06, so they have no experience with a C8, period. So all of a sudden now when you get a car, and I think it's funny because you commented on cars for 2 years, 3 years on the C8, but then you still didn't pick up any of the knowledge along the way. You aren't supposed to redline this car within the first 500 miles. You shouldn't launch control this car until I believe after 1,200 or 1,500 miles. You shouldn't even track this car to after 1,500 miles. So when this information is actually clearly stated inside the owner's manual, which no one reads, and GM has come out and said this in so many releases or press releases of this vehicle, but yet people are still doing it. We see footage on the internet with cars less than 500 miles and people are revving them hard, and all this information is said, hey, don't do it. But the reason why I really decided to make this video is because there are several people that have cars that haven't had issues. And I say that to you again, there are several people that have cars that haven't had issues. And what I start to realize, or the trend I see, let's say that word, I think it's a better choice. The trend I see is if you take care of the car or break it in correctly, the issues don't seem to be there. I will use my own personal experience. I do not have a C8 Z06, but I have a base C8. When I got my base C8, there was a lot of concerns about malfunctions and it not being a good car and so forth. But I broke it in correctly, and I was actually extra careful because a lot of the things they said I shouldn't do, I didn't even do until I was approaching 1,800 miles. So I felt like at that point in time, the car was truly broken in. I look at Eddie X, Speed Phenom, Amelia, and so forth, and you see they were more cautious with their break-in. And what makes me say this vehicle isn't a bust or is reliable is I have to go back to my man at Holston, or Speed Phenom for those that don't know. And the one thing about Austin is I don't know anybody else that abuses their car the way he does. And I'm not saying he goes out and beats on it and does things some of the nature like what Street Speed does. But what I'm sitting there saying is he tracks his car hard, but at the same point in time, he always follows the maintenance interviews suggested by the manufacturer. And he's put a lot of miles on his car in a short amount of time, and he has no issues. The same thing when he got his base C8. So I won't lie to you, YouTube influencers do play a part in some people's decisions to purchase cars, because when I was hesitant to get a C8, the person that made me feel like I could get a C8 and not have issues was Austin. And I say that to you not because I'm going to do the things that he does, but because I watched him do the things he do, and he sticks to what the information that's provided to him, and he never has any issues. So the one thing I learned is if you follow the manufacturer's information, I would say a large time, almost 90% of the time, you don't have issues. When I see people that have issues, they want to sit there and say, well, I did this, but you should be able to do it to a new car. Most of these people that's having the issues never owned a high performance sports car. And I say that to you again. Most of these people that are having these issues never owned a high performance sports car. Or if they owned a high performance sports car, they never owned a high performance sports car during the break-in period. And to me, that's a big thing. Because yes, I've owned several Corvettes before. My first Corvette I ever owned, I purchased with just over 1,200 miles. So I didn't even go through the break-in procedures. I trusted somebody else did the procedures well, but I bought my first Corvette with 1,200 miles. Every sports car I've ever owned or driven was already past the break-in point. Most of my friends who own sports cars, they bought them on the used market, and again, the break-in period was already over. So when they get the car, they instantly go out and beat on it. I'm not even gonna lie to you. When I was selling cars, the C6 and the C7 Corvette, brand new, and we would take people out on test drives, and I know you're like, what, you test drove Corvettes? Yes, we test drove Corvettes. Because our policy was you couldn't buy a car without test driving it. You may have had to prove that you could purchase it before you got in a test drive, but you test drove the vehicle. But when we took people out on test drives in these cars, even then, there were some things we would do and some things we would not do. Because we're like, you can't do this at this point in time. You can't do this at this point in time. But you can, go ahead and step on it. You feel the acceleration, so forth. So even back then, we understood and we shared with the customer things they should do. Now, whether or not they bought the car and did it, and whether or not those cars are more forgiving, because I feel like, I hate to say it, I feel like the C7 was more forgiving during a bad break-in procedure than the C8. But either way, you can't use that as a reference to sit there and say because another version of a car that was built by the same manufacturer could handle more misuse than another, that makes the new car that the manufacturer just made less reliable. Now, I get it. Many people aren't going to like this conversation. This is just true information I'm sharing with you. So I feel like, and I hate to say it, a lot of the malfunctions that we're seeing on the internet and the posts and people commenting in the YouTube videos and all this information, I'm not going to come out and sit there and say some of this isn't part of maybe bad production or a bad part from GM. But what I will sit there and say to you is that there is a strong record right now that shows if you follow the break-in procedure suggested by the manufacturer, there are a lot of cars that are not malfunctioning. There are a lot of people who aren't having issues with their cars, but that's not brought to the forefront. those aren't the cars we focus on, because what we always tend to focus on is the bad, not the good. And that's understandable, because we all want to know what happens if something goes wrong. And at this point, GM is stepping in to honor the warranties they put on these vehicles. Now, one thing I will sit there and say, and I did make a video about the C8 being big business, I think GM understood what was going to take place. And the more I start to think about these things and have conversations about it, I start to realize that I'm not going to say flippers is a major issue with this vehicle, but a big problem with this vehicle right now is it's being sold by dealerships that aren't Chevy dealerships. And more people are acquiring this vehicle on the secondhand market than as a new car purchase. Although it may have less than 100 miles on it and it is technically a brand new car, more people are getting these cars from the secondhand market. Just as I look out there now to see what's on the market and how can I get a Z06, knowing I'm not going to pay this crazy pricing. But I do have a video coming about the crazy market value of this car. But what you see is this car is at a lot of luxury or secondhand used car dealers. And when you buy a car from a used car dealer, there's nothing wrong with that. I want you to understand that there's nothing wrong with going out to a exotic used car dealer or a high performance secondhand used car dealer. But the problem is the information that is given to the original owner, who had no intention on keeping the vehicle, is lost. So you can't even criticize the salesman, because you don't even know if the salesman did their job 100% to the fullest, where they explained the break-in procedures, how to activate OnStart, how to utilize certain equipment on the car, when the person literally took the car with less than 12 miles and sold it to another location. And then now we have somebody buying it off the used market who are completely unaware of any of the information that was relayed to their original owner. They go out, try to have fun with this car, treat it like a Dodge Charger, Dodge Demon, any other typical car that they've seen or driven, a Chevy Impala, a Trailblazer, whatever it may be. They go out and get behind the wheels of this car and start driving it, trying to get performance out of it, not understanding the break-in procedures. So let that marinate for a minute for you, and let me know what you think in the comments. Think about the videos you've seen. Think about the posts you've seen. Think about the comments. And I say this even to my son, is most people are going to write or explain something to you to make it seem like it's not their fault, to make it seem like they didn't do something they wasn't supposed to do. But if you actually read it and listen to when or how they said the vehicle malfunctioned, you can honestly see it doesn't make sense, or you can read between the lines. And I just ask you to take a moment and read between the lines, or process the information that's given to you, and then tell me, do you think that when these vehicles broke, or the vehicles you've seen broken, have actually been broken in the correct way per GM's break-in period for the C8 Z06? Let me know. I think you'll be surprised. But like I said before, and I use Speed Phenom as a reference, check out Austin's page. He has a C8 Z06. Check out his journey and see how he broke in his car, and also take a look at what he does to his car. And I say that to you because if you want to have a good reference of what this vehicle can do, look how he tracks his car, look at the way he maintains his car, and then make a decision off of that. If you aren't going to be the person that maintain it that way, I can completely understand. But what I come from, and what I just told you before, is what I see is if the car is maintained, it performs. And that's what I use as a reference. But that's just me. Anyway, ICNV Drivers Edition. Please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, join the ICNV Drivers Edition community. We have conversations like this, like I told you before. I talk about hot topics or things that are trending. I talk about conversations that's brought up by my ICNV Drivers Edition community. And this is one of those issues, because I'm being told over and over again This is an unreliable car. The engines are blowing up everywhere. And I even made a reference before talking to one of my friends who works at a GM dealer. And he even stated to me that there was 30 Z06s out of like the first 300-400 cars built that had issues. And that is a huge percent. That's like 10% of the cars. And that just doesn't make sense when any other vehicle and the Corvettes of the past have had less than 1% of the cars malfunction. So why is this one such a big issue? And that's why I decided to make a video on it. And a lot of the information we're coming across, or a lot of information that's being shared with me, is improper braking procedures. So I'm sharing that with you. But like I said before, until the next video, stay safe, stay blessed. Please comment. I will respond, and I will also see you in these streets. Peace.